Welcome to a new episode from Perfect English Podcast. Today we're going to focus on grammar. And to be specific, we are going to talk about the present perfect progressive. Last week we talked about the present perfect simple. So if you want to refer to what we said about the present perfect last week, it's episode 56. But now let's start talking about the present perfect progressive. Now I will start with an example. I have been sitting here since 7 o'clock. Now if you look at this example, I have been sitting here since 7 o'clock. First, let's notice how we form the present perfect progressive. We use have as an auxiliary verb, and we also use been as an auxiliary verb. So we have two auxiliary verbs here. Have for the perfect, been for the continuous or the progressive. And the verb is in the ing form. So it is, I have been sitting here since 7 o'clock. Now, obviously, if we want to say he, she, or it, we will need to use has instead. But been is always the same, and the verb is always in the present participle or ing form. But now let's focus on what we care about the most. Why do we use it, and when do we use the present perfect progressive? Now the sentence, I have been sitting here since 7 o'clock. What does that tell you? What am I talking about here? Am I talking about something that happened in the past with no relation to the present whatsoever? Well, it doesn't sound like that. It seems that I'm talking about something that started in the past and still continues to the present. When I say I have been sitting here since 7 o'clock, what do you think I am doing now? I'm still sitting. And that's why I use the present perfect continuous. I'm talking about an action or an activity that began in the past and continues to the present. And I especially focus on the duration of this activity. And when we want to talk about the duration of an activity that started in the past and continues to the present, we can use some words to make that even clearer in the sentence. We can use since, like we used it here. I said, I have been sitting here since 7 o'clock. Or we can use for. We can say, I have been sitting here for 2 hours. Now, the difference between since and for is that we use since with a specific time in the past, like here, since 7 o'clock, that's a specific time, and we use for with a duration of time. In this case, 2 hours. But the duration of time could be any duration of time. It could be 2 hours, 2 days, 2 weeks, 3 years. It doesn't matter. When we have a duration of time, we use for. When we have a specific time in the past, we use since. But the key thing to remember is that this action we're talking about, or this activity we're talking about, started in the past and continues to the present. Now let's take a look at some other examples to see if we have other time words we can use with the present perfect progressive. It has been raining all day. It is still raining right now. Well, if you look at this example, we don't have since or for. We did not say since 7 o'clock in the morning. We didn't say for 2 or 3 or 10 hours. We said all day. And the key thing we need to remember, when we say all day in this case, we mean it is still raining. We can use all not only with day, we can use all morning, all day, all week, all year. And that is another possible time phrase we can use with the present perfect progressive. Because the key meaning is that it has been raining all day. It started in the past sometime. We don't know exactly when it started, but the important thing is that it is still raining right now. So remember, this tense, the present perfect progressive, is used to indicate the duration of an activity that began in the past and continues to the present. And when the tense has this meaning, it is used with time words such as for, since, all morning, all day, and all week. Now I will move to another example, and we will see that we almost have exactly the same meaning, but we can't use the present perfect progressive. We can say, I have known Alex since he was a child. If we think about it, I got to know Alex since he was a child, and I still know Alex. So it is something that started in the past, and it still continues to the present. But can't we say, I have been knowing Alex since he was a child? Well, that would be a mistake. We can't say, I have been knowing Alex since he was a child. But according to what we said at the beginning, it should be possible. But here's the trick. Some verbs cannot be used with the present perfect progressive. Actually, they cannot be used with any progressive tense because they do not describe an action, they describe a state. And these are the verbs that we call stative verbs, verbs with stative meaning. And verbs with stative meaning are not used in the progressive. They are used in simple tenses. And what does that mean? What is the meaning of stative verbs? Now, when you talk about verbs like know, like, love, understand, we're not talking about something that is an action. We're talking about something that is a state. So when we think about it, do we need a list to know? Well, a list might be useful, but another thing that should tell you if this verb is an action verb or if it is a stative verb, ask yourself, can we have a duration for this verb? For know, for example, the actual know verb or the know activity, can it be continuous or progressive? Well, it cannot be like that because when you know somebody, you know this person, it's over. There's no progress. There are no steps. You know this person and it's over. When you talk about have in the meaning of own, for example, you can say, I have had this car since 2010. Well, it is not continuous. It is not progressive because you had this car and that's it. No steps. It is not like the action happens over some time. Once you bought this car, it's yours. You have it. That's it. So even if you still have it today, it is not continuous. The verb itself is a stative verb. And you need to remember that stative verbs cannot be used in progressive. In our case today, present perfect progressive. Now, I'll give you some common examples of stative verbs so that you can remember them later. Stative verbs can talk about a mental state, can describe a mental state, like when we say know, realize, understand, recognize, believe, feel, suppose, need, desire. They can also talk about an emotional state, like love, like, appreciate, please, prefer, hate, etc. They can also describe possession, like the verb possess, or have when it comes in the meaning of own, or the verb own itself, or belong. These are stative verbs that describe possession. Or they can describe sense perceptions, like taste, smell, hear, feel, or see. And we have some other stative verbs that talk about different things like the verb seem, look, appear, sound, resemble, owe, exist, matter, consist of, or contain. So remember, what we care about in these verbs, that these verbs describe a state instead of describing an action. So even if the verbs started in the past and continue to the present, you cannot use them with the present perfect progressive because they are not talking about an action. But is that all about the present perfect progressive? Well, not quite. Now, there is more to the present progressive. Let's take a look at this example. I have been thinking about changing my major. If you think about it, first of all, we don't have any specific mention of time. And there is actually no indication that I'm still doing that or not. Maybe because we don't want to focus on this idea. We don't want to focus on the idea that something started in the past and continues to the present. Maybe here we want to talk about something else, or we want to focus on something else. What do you think we're focusing on? How about something that has been happening recently or lately? And this is the focus of what I'm talking about. Let's take a look at another example and see if this is the case. All of the students have been studying hard. Final exams start next week. Well, obviously, we can tell that the students should be studying now, should still be studying now, but we don't know that. And to be honest, we don't care about that. What we care about is that the students have been studying hard recently or lately. That's what we're focusing on. So when the present perfect progressive is used without any specific mention of time, it expresses a general activity in progress recently or lately. Well, you might think that it is still happening now. Maybe yes, maybe no. Who cares? What we care about is that it has been happening recently or lately. Let's take another example and see how that works. My back hurts, so I have been sleeping on the floor lately. The bed is too soft. I'm talking about what I've been doing recently or lately. I've been sleeping on the floor lately. What's important in this sentence is not the fact that something started in the past and still continues to the present. That is not what we're talking about here. I'm talking about an activity I've been doing recently. Now you can see somebody who is panting, like doing this. And you might ask this person, what's wrong? And this person can tell you, I've been running. I've been running all the way here. And you ask yourself, this person is not running anymore. So the action did not start in the past and still continues to the present. But this person still used the present perfect progressive. Well, simply because it doesn't matter if the action still continues or not. What matters is that I've been doing that recently and look at the result. I'm tired now. I've been running all the way and that's why you see me tired. You look at a person and you say, for example, your eyes are red. What's wrong? And this person can tell you, I haven't been sleeping well recently. So I'm talking about an action in progress recently or lately. And in this case, your choice of tense is the present perfect progressive. And now let's move to a final case where the present perfect simple and progressive can be used with almost no difference in meaning. We use this with certain verbs, most notably live, work, and teach. And with live, work, and teach, there is little or even no difference in meaning between the two tenses when since or for is used. Let me give you some examples. We can say, I have lived here since 1995, or I have been living here since 1995. The difference in meaning is very small. You can use either if you want, with no problems at all. Both of them are right. And both of them tell the person who's listening to you that you are talking about an activity that started in the past and continues to the present. Well, the slight difference between them is when you say, I have lived here since 1995, you are focusing more on the result of the action, that you have been here for a long time, for example. And in the second one, I have been living here since 1995, you're focusing on the action itself. But to be honest, it doesn't matter. In everyday language, whether you use the present perfect simple or progressive, it doesn't make that much of a difference. Let's take a look at another example. He has worked at the same store for 10 years. Or we can say, he has been working at the same store for 10 years. And the meaning is almost the same. So that is all we need to know about the present perfect progressive. Remember, we use it when we want to talk about an activity that started in the past and continues to the present. We use time words with the present perfect progressive like for, since, all morning, all day, all week. We need to pay attention not to use it with stative verbs and use the present perfect simple instead. We said that we can use the present perfect progressive without any specific mention of time to express a general activity in progress recently or lately. And finally, we said that we can use it with certain verbs in both the present perfect simple or progressive with no difference in meaning, especially with the verbs live, work, and teach. Now, I hope I made the present perfect progressive easier for you to understand and, most importantly, to use in your writing and conversation. But now, before we stop this episode, how about taking a look at some exercises that we can do together? First, I will read a sentence to you, and you will have to find the mistake in the sentence. Ready? Let's do it. Now, the first sentence, I'm going to read it twice. So take your time. If you need more time, pause the recording, think about it, and then I will give you the answer and we will explain it together. So the first sentence, the boys are playing soccer right now. They are playing for almost 2 hours. They must be getting tired. The boys are playing soccer right now. They are playing for almost 2 hours. They must be getting tired. Did you spot the mistake in this sentence? Well, obviously the mistake is in the second sentence. They are playing for almost 2 hours. This is present continuous. And if you just say that the boys are playing soccer right now, like in the first sentence, that's no problem because I'm just describing what's happening right now before my eyes. But the second sentence, I'm talking about something that started in the past and still continues to the present. and I still use the present continuous, which is a mistake. I should use the present perfect continuous or progressive. Instead of saying they are playing for almost 2 hours, I should say they have been playing for almost 2 hours. I hope you guessed that right, but if you didn't, don't worry, we have more examples, and you will have other chances to spot the mistake. Now for the second sentence. Alex is talking on the phone. He talked on the phone for more than half an hour. He should hang up soon. Long distance is expensive. Alex is talking on the phone. He talked on the phone for more than half an hour. He should hang up soon. Long distance is expensive. What do you think? Did you spot the mistake? Well, it is similar to the first sentence. Alex is talking on the phone. I use the present progressive, and I'm right here because I'm describing what I see or what is happening right now at the moment of speaking. But the second sentence, he talked on the phone for more than half an hour. Well, I'm trying to explain here, or I'm trying to describe an action that started in the past and still continues to the present, and I use the past simple for that. Well, that is not the right tense to use here. We use the past simple to talk about something that happened in the past with no relation to the present. But here it's different. I should use the present perfect progressive. I'm saying he started talking on the phone a half an hour ago, and he's still talking on the phone. So I should say he has been talking on the phone for more than half an hour. He has been talking. You remember, we use have, in this case has, because we're using it with he. We use been for the progressive and the verb in ing form. So he has been talking on the phone for more than half an hour. Let's take a look at a third example. I'm trying to study. I try to study for the last hour, but something always seems to interrupt me. I think I'd better go to the library. I'm trying to study. I try to study for the last hour, but something always seems to interrupt me. I think I'd better go to the library. What do you think? I'm trying to study. It's happening right now. I try to study for the last hour. Well, you're talking about an activity that you've been doing recently, and that is trying to study. But you use the present simple, and that is a mistake. We should say, I have been trying to study for the last hour, instead of I try to study for the last hour. Now let's take a look at one more example. Mr. Ford is waiting in the dentist's office. He was waiting there for the last 20 minutes. He hopes the dentist can see him soon because he has a bad toothache. Mr. Ford is waiting in the dentist's office. He was waiting there for the last 20 minutes. He hopes the dentist can see him soon because he has a bad toothache. Did you spot the mistake? Obviously, it's in the second sentence. In the first sentence, we said Mr. Ford is waiting in the dentist's office. We know what Mr. Ford is doing right now. But look at the second sentence. He was waiting there for the last 20 minutes. We're talking about an action that started in the past and continues to the present, but we picked the wrong tense to express that meaning. We used the past progressive, was waiting. But this is not what we want to use. We want to use the present perfect progressive. We should say he has been waiting there for the last 20 minutes. And now I will move to another kind of exercise I would like to do with you. I will give you an example, but I'm not going to use any tense with a verb. I'm going to give you the verb in the base form. And you will have to choose between the present perfect or the present perfect progressive. Now, for example, I will say it snow all day. I wonder when it will stop. And you will have to think about snow. What should we say? It has snowed all day, or it has been snowing. So you see, I'm going to give you the verb in its base form, snow, and you will have to think about the proper tense to use in the sentence. In this case, it has been snowing. I've already done the first. Let's take a look at another sentence. We, the verb is have, 3 major snowstorms so far this winter. I wonder how many more we will have. We have 3 major snowstorms so far this winter. I wonder how many more we will have. So what do you think? Should it be present perfect or present perfect progressive? We should say we have had 3 major snowstorms so far this winter. I wonder how many more we will have. Now, how do we know it's present perfect simple, not progressive? Well, we have two things to tell us here. First of all, we're talking about the verb have, which is a stative verb here. And the second thing, we have 3 major snowstorms. When you mention the number of times something has happened recently, we don't use the present perfect continuous. Because 3 things cannot be progressive or continuous at the same time. I can't say, for example, I've been reading 3 books recently. Unless you're reading the 3 books at the same time, which is strange. When you use a number like here, you're talking about achievements, something you have achieved. Or in this case, it's not an achievement, you're just counting the snowstorms. And in this case, you use the present perfect simple instead of the present perfect progressive. Let's take a look at another example. It's 10 p.m. I study for 2 hours and probably won't finish until midnight. It's 10 p.m. I study for 2 hours and probably won't finish until midnight. So what do you think? Should we use study in the present perfect or the present perfect progressive? Think about it. So the first thing to look at here is the meaning of the sentence. Well, obviously for 2 hours, so that means an action that started in the past and still continues to the present. And there is a mention to the action that is not finished yet and probably won't finish until midnight. And the final check is the verb itself, which is study. Is it an action verb or is it a stative verb? Well, in this case, it is an action verb. We can use it with a present perfect progressive, and the meaning we want to talk about here is suitable for the present perfect progressive, something that started in the past and still continues to the present. So we should say here, I have been studying for 2 hours and probably won't finish until midnight. Now let's take a look at another example. I write them 3 times, but I still haven't received a reply. I write them 3 times, but I still haven't received a reply. What do you think? Write is an action verb, but can we use it in the present perfect progressive or should we use the present perfect? Well, for you who figured out that it is the present perfect that we need here, you're right. Because as we just said, the clue here is we're not talking about the action itself. We're focusing more on how many times it has happened recently. We said here 3 times. And when you talk about how many times something has happened recently, you use the present perfect simple, not the present perfect progressive. So here, what we should say, I have written them 3 times, but I still haven't received a reply. Don't use the present perfect progressive with this one. And now we will have 2 final examples, and I'm going to use a similar example. With one you should use the present perfect, with the other you should use the present perfect progressive. Let's start with the first one. The telephone rang 4 times in the last hour, and each time it has been for my office mate. The telephone rang 4 times in the last hour, and each time it has been for my office mate. What do you think? Well, it should be easy by now. The focus is not on the action that has been happening recently. The focus is on how many times it has happened recently. And in this case, 4 times in the last hour. So we should use the present perfect simple. We should say the telephone has rung 4 times in the last hour, and each time it has been for my office mate. Now, obviously, the next one is going to be present perfect progressive. But anyway, we're going to see it together. The telephone rang for almost a minute. Why doesn't someone answer it? You see, here, we're not talking about how many times. The telephone started ringing about a minute ago, and it's still ringing. So we're talking about an action that started in the past and still continues to the present, and that is ring, so we should use the present perfect progressive. The telephone has been ringing for almost a minute. Why doesn't someone answer it? I hope you found the information I shared with you today useful. I hope you can understand the present perfect progressive a lot better after what we said today. And remember, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, you can use the link I'm going to leave in the description of this episode to check the Perfect English podcast on my website. You can use the contact me to ask me any questions you want. If the answer to your question is quick, I'm going to write you back. If the answer is long, I'm going to include it in one of the upcoming episodes. So don't be shy to connect. Don't be shy to ask your questions. I'm going to be as helpful as I can as soon as possible. This is your host, Danny, saying thank you very much for listening to another episode from Perfect English Podcast. I will see you tomorrow in a new episode. Thank you very much.